Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Schott, and I'm here to discuss with you our Unit 4. Our Unit 4 is going to be covering the biology of COVID, and we're starting with talking about the biology of COVID-19. So today or in this lecture rather, we're going to go over a couple of topics. We're going to be looking at Lesson 1. Lesson 1 is what is a coronavirus? And so these are our unit objectives. We've got quite a few here, but really today, what we're going to do, lesson 1, what is a coronavirus? We're going to be looking at what is a virus, what is a coronavirus, and what is the history of coronaviruses in humans? And then last, what is the structure of a coronavirus? So we're looking at this in the context of evolution. And the reason we're talking about this is because it's something relevant that has happened to all of us, right? We all lived through this pandemic, and we were kind of educated roughly in evolution of viruses and what all of this meant for us in terms of health. So we're going to be relating the evolution of coronaviruses to evolution in general, but we'll be starting with a couple of things. Just again, what is a virus? So we've seen several different outbreaks of coronaviruses. So the coronavirus family themselves are viruses that tend to cause a cold. We've seen more virulent versions break out. So you can see that we've got a new virus in 2019 called the SARS covariant 2 that emerged in Wuhan, China. Prior to that, we'll see that we saw MERS and SARS, and then I can't remember, I feel like there was another one prior to that as well. But anyway, this is what we saw happen in 2019, right? So what is a virus? A virus is non-cellular. It is an obligate parasite. What that means is that viruses cannot live and replicate on their own. They must do so in a host cell. So viruses need a host cell to replicate and do all the things that they do to be alive, I guess you could say. They vary considerably in the shapes, sizes, and types. We also have genetic differences between viruses. So viruses can either be RNA-based or DNA-based. They're not ever DNA and RNA. They just have one or the other. They have a very small genome. So that's what they're saying, that this is a small number of genes. And they have a protein coat called a capsid that surrounds the genetic material. They can have little accessories like tail fibers or spikes that assist the virus in attaching to the target host cell, but not all do. Some viruses, like the coronavirus, COVID-19 virus, or SARS covariant number 2, possess an envelope that surrounds the capsid. The envelope is actually the plasma membrane of the host cell. So when viruses enter the cell, they take over the cell's machinery to make copies of themselves, and they make millions of baby viruses, and they burst out of the cell. When they do that, these enveloped viruses take a portion of the plasma membrane with them. Um, and that's from the host. Very interesting. It doesn't function in the same way that a plasma membrane in a regular cell would, with like regulation of transport, but it does assist with attachment and entry of the virus into a host cell. Here's some other types of viruses. These are bacteriophages. They infect bacteria, and this is adenovirus. These are, it says polyhedral. These are common. If you've ever had acute bronchitis with pink eye, possibly, you've probably had adenovirus, but we've all had adenovirus. It's pretty ubiquitous everywhere, but it is a cold virus that we get, but it causes acute bronchitis in a lot of cases. This is the influenza virus. It's got RNA in the middle. That's its genetic material. And then over here, you see the spikes around it. Its capsid is in there, and it is also an enveloped virus. So coronaviruses are a group of related RNA viruses that infect avian and mammalian species. They're enveloped, so they've got that. They also have spikes, crown crown-like spikes emerging from the surface of the virus. Some cause mild respiratory illnesses. Like I said, the cold, there are coronaviruses that will just cause a cold. But there's others that can cause intestinal diseases, especially in livestock, chickens, pigs, and cattle. And in humans, some variants are more lethal, as we have seen. So here are some coronaviruses in humans. These are the ones that are the common cold variants. Here is SARS. This was something that came way before COVID. And then we had MERS here as well. This was coming from Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, or causing Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome in humans, but I believe it came from camels. And then COVID-19 is caused by the SARS covariant 2 virus. So the history of coronaviruses in humans is kind of interesting. Just so you know, many viruses that we know today are what we call zoonotic in origin. So that means that they didn't always have a human host as the primary reservoir or place where we find them in nature. A lot of these things are coming from other animals. So zoological means that there's a natural place for this virus and it's widely circulated amongst some other animals. And often they will jump species. So they have to acquire mutations in order to do this, which is why we're talking about this in the context of evolution. So they have to evolve in order to jump species. So starting in the 1950s, mild cases of coronaviruses and infections were first recorded in humans. So that's probably when we first started seeing it. And then we have the severe form that's appearing in China in 2002. It was thought to have originated in bats or civet cats. So that was that first SARS outbreak. It was spread to humans and it caused a regional outbreak or epidemic in 2003. So it didn't make it much further past there. People, if you recall, if you were around and kind of watching the news at the time, people were wearing masks. There were kind of travel restrictions and all of these things because they were trying to limit the spread of SARS. MERS appeared in Jordan. Yes, so it did come from camels. It originated in bats, is what we thought, and then spread to camels. Humans who were working with camels caused a regional pandemic from 2012 to 2019. And then most recently, we saw the SARS covariant 2 appearing in Wuhan in the province of China in 2019. And this became a global pandemic because this virus evolved mechanisms to be transmitted from person to person quite easily. So this is, again, an enveloped virus. It's RNA, but it does have a small number of genes, just 4 main structural proteins and several non-structural proteins. But it has 4 main structural proteins that make up the capsid and envelope. We've got the spike or S glycoproteins. These are on the viral surface and aid in the binding of the envelope of the virus to host cells. Then we have envelope E glycoproteins. These are involved in the production and maturation of the virus. Membrane M glycoproteins determine the shape of the virus envelope. And then the nucleocapsid proteins, which are involved in viral replication. There are some non-structural proteins involved in viral replication, maturation, and release. So here are the little spikes. You've probably heard a lot about the spikes, specifically when we got into vaccinations, right? The spikes give the virus its name, crown, or corona. So it's like, we're putting a crown on, it's got the spikes. These assist the virus in identifying and entering host cells. So that's why they would be relevant when we talk about vaccination, and we'll get there. So these are some review questions. I recommend you go over them, but I'll go over them with you here. So if you want to pause and take a moment to try and answer them, I'll give you a second. Okay, so question 1, which of the following would not be found in a virus? If you answered nucleus, that would be correct. So a virus will have genetic material, either DNA or RNA. Not all viruses have an exterior envelope, but coronavirus or COVID happens to be an enveloped virus. Most viruses will have a capsid, but nuclei or nucleus is only found in a cell. Which of the following is not true concerning the structure of a coronavirus? Let's see. So I believe it's going to be D. So let's go back and look at our S proteins. Um, I'm so sorry. I made an error in reading. DNA is its genetic material. This is incorrect. So remember that coronaviruses are RNA-based viruses. I read this incorrectly, but there we go. Okay, so we'll come back and do lesson 2 in another video.